Hey y'all, welcome back to Exile Wargaming. Today, we're going to be talking about some different Harlequins, synergies, strategies that we can utilize to be both fun, competitive, and get these Harlequins off the shelves. Now, in our first video, we talked some ideas that we can incorporate into our lists, make them a little bit more functional, a little bit more fun, fill the gaps, what we were missing. In this video, I really want to show how these synergies interact and why it's so important to function as a cohesive and whole unit in general. Now, this is going to be kind of a rant, my first rant, if you will. Recently, I had the privilege of having my list reviewed by some very well respected individuals in this community, and some of the suggestions I saw coming. I knew what they were going to recommend. It just didn't pan out, and it oftentimes doesn't pan out the way that we intend. So let's go over some of the misconceptions. I think oftentimes we're looking at each individual unit that we have available to us in the index as something in a vacuum. What we really want to focus on is how they all interact together. So one of the misconceptions is that our units are weak. They're overcosted. They do very little damage. They trade inefficiently, and that their craft world counterparts are just much better in a given role. Now, while that may be true in a vacuum, that not many of our units stand out, with appropriate buffs and support, they can be durable, difficult to engage with, and do a lot of damage. Playing this army as one cohesive unit that moves together allows us to trade up very, very well. Now, one of the best examples of this is a troop with a troop master getting out of a falcon. With those full rerolls to wound, it allows our 130 point unit to deal 13 to 17 wounds on average to a land raider equivalent without counting any of the bright lance or pulse laser fire coming off that falcon. With 6 to 7 dev wounds in the combat phase, 1 to 2 normal wounds, 3 to 6 coming from our fusion pistols, and another 3 from grenades if we need to throw them and punch up a little bit. Combine this with the firepower from our Falcon, we're only exposing one unit from our army for our opponents to strike back to. And I would take that 130 point for 260 point trade every single time. Similarly, I hear this all the time. Striking scorpions out of a Falcon are objectively better. Fire dragons out of a Falcon would be better. But the reality is, we're doing just as much damage as any of those units, if not more, but with more guaranteed damage. The dev wounds not allowing our opponents to make saves allows the hit back to be a lot less swingy in any other situation. Another great synergy would be using Star Weavers and our staging effectively. Now, our Star Weavers allow our units to embark at the end of the fight phase, which forces extra activations from your opponent to remove a Troop Master unit after they disembark from a Falcon. Now, we can move units afterwards behind walls or into cover using these movement shenanigans at the end of the combat phase. Charging first can eliminate Overwatch if we're using our Star Weavers to do that, so we don't get burned off the board. Uh, they're small enough to hold objectives behind terrain in the early game, and they allow our units to launch that extra 3 inches before they get into combat. It really turns a lot of our units into something like a jump pack equivalent. Now, one of my favorite interactions is Skyweavers with our indirect fire or our bright lances. Skyweavers are excellent at removing tough vehicles in conjunction with the D cannons or firing fading heavy support. One bright lance equivalent, one d6 plus 2 shot with a fate dice followed up by the Skyweavers can bring down almost anything. With minimal exposure to return fire, it's not like exposing a Lancer or a Caladius or a Land Raider or a Monolith. All we're getting hit back with is that 95 point Skyweaver unit. And what they're doing afterwards is either move blocking, holding an objective, or giving our opponent a difficult decision to make in their following turn. This almost guarantees us destroying most transports. If you think about this, you fire a D cannon into a Rhino behind cover or an Impulsor. We get 6, 7, 8 wounds. Our Skyweavers on average are doing another 6 mortal wounds or devastating wounds. Those units are popped pretty realistically and pretty easily each and every game. There is nothing on the board that can hide or stage from D cannons and Skyweavers. This is all about minimizing the clapback on our following turn. Now, another one of the synergies we absolutely have to use is move blocking. Our entire army can do this, and we should be doing this each and every game. If we do it correctly, we have enough units to be able to dictate the terms of engagement. Now, we should be running between 16 and 20 units in each list. It's okay to sacrifice some of them. Star Weavers, your non-troop master troops, your swooping hawks, they're all here for just this. And after the Sky Weavers have disposed of their target and they filled out their role, you can utilize them to do this as well. Now, the overall strategy of this army is to play as one cohesive unit. Our mobility and volume of units allow us to fight wherever we choose, whenever we choose. Just focus on one section of the board at a time, if necessary, and move block the rest. Every unit in your army should have an accountability buddy, which is one of my favorite phrases, right? No single unit in the Harlequin Index is good by itself, but used in conjunction with other units, they can be absolutely phenomenal. If you watch any of the battle reports that I do, you will see that I almost always stage a Falcon, a Skyweaver, and Star Weavers together. On each flank, I have another Falcon in the center of each deployment zone to shift to whatever portion of the board needs that support. And then I have my D cannons pushed up in the middle to cover objectives wherever they need to be. This is about playing as one cohesive unit. It is the sum of the parts rather than the individual units themselves. When we get into the list building portion of this, we want to make sure that we're maximizing our activations while minimizing our opponent's impact to interact with us afterwards. We have the capability to shift our entire army each turn without exposing too much. So let's do it. Build redundancy and symmetry into your list and avoid over specialization, right? We don't want multiple max size units of troops and wave serpents or a ton of 4-man Skyweaver units to try to fire and fade each turn. We want to run in small pairs instead. Out activate or threat overload our opponent if possible. If we're running 19 or 20 units and our opponent is only running 8, 9, or 10 that really interact with us, we can make sure that we are out activating them through use of our transports, our movement shenanigans, the Star Weavers, and our move blocking very, very effectively. So to sum this up, we want to maximize our activation, so it doesn't matter how many units our opponent has, they cannot deal with each and every one of ours. We want to move in pairs, have those accountability buddies to maximize the efficiency of each one of our units. This is the Troop Masters and the Falcons. This is utilizing your Star Weavers to get the movement shenanigans at the end of the combat phase or keep your other units from getting engaged with. Have a role and a purpose for each one of your units. I don't believe that D cannons are the absolute best option in the index, but it does serve a very specific role. For example, it deals with monsters and hard targets. It keeps aggressive armies from staging on us on the first couple turns, and it also makes sure that we're not clogging up our firing lanes. We have Falcons, which are big, and Star Weavers, which are not that big, but in conjunction with Sky Weavers, they're taking up a lot of space in the backfield. Figure out an army and a list that works for you, where everything has a purpose and a role, even if it's not super points efficient. That's okay. But most importantly, you want to be able to overload sections of the board with what feels like our entire force each and every turn and move block the rest. If you imagine, a lot of opponents will split up their force. They'll send some to the middle, some to the bottom objective, some to the top objective. Well, we have the ability to put 1,500 points of our army at any given point in time on the first couple turns onto one of those objectives. I normally choose a top flank. Now you imagine 1,500 points of our army devastate 600 or 700 points of theirs. In the following turn, they don't have much to engage with. Then we move our force again into another section. Before you know it, you are far ahead in primary or secondary, or you just have the ability to control the rest of the game with ease. So I hope this helps you understand where I'm coming from, why I build the list the way that I do, my play style. There are so many different interactions and synergies, and each and every person out there is going to approach this game a different way. But don't get caught up in the most efficient units or putting the absolute most broken units in your army each and every game. To be realistic, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you understand your army, you bring a well-rounded list, and each and every part of it has a specific role. I played with one of the best players in the world, top in faction, pretty regularly. I never beat him. And he really inspired me to do this. The faction that he chose, I'm not going to say it here because I don't want to oust who I am or what's going on, was not a good faction. It was deemed one of the absolute worst in the game, and he still found himself competitive in every environment. He was winning tournaments. He was taking events by storm with one of the worst deemed armies out there. And it really kind of inspired me to get into this. Specialize in a faction, figure out what you're good at, figure out what you're bad at, and try to fill those roles. You will have fun, good, competitive games. So let's bring the Quins off the shelves. Don't worry what anyone says. Have fun, have a well-rounded list, and we'll all be better off for it. I appreciate you all for listening. Thank you again. Please like, share, subscribe, comment. Even if you disagree with me, I appreciate you listening to me rant. Comment in the section anyway. It helps more than you know. Thanks again. Take care.